If you've wanted a car with superb go-anywhere ability, a luxurious cabin, and of course 7 seats, then for a long time the best choice has been the Land Rover Discovery. It's a vehicle that will go here, there and everywhere, but can also take the kids to school or take 7 people away in comfort. But these days, the Discovery's job isn't as easy as it once was, and in fact, one of its key competitors comes from within JLR's own range in the form of the Defender. So, if you are looking for a 7-seater luxurious car, why should you pick the Land Rover Discovery? Well, we've got the brand new version to find out just what it has to offer in this day and age. The look of the Discovery has definitely evolved over time, and this latest generation one just takes things one step further with slightly sharpened headlights, while around the back there's still that contentious number plate design, which I personally don't have too much of a problem with. But I am aware that there are packages from third-party suppliers that are able to centralise that if it really is too much of an issue. I've always liked the nice blend that you get in the Discovery, mixing between high-end materials but a more rugged utilitarian feel. So for instance, we've got this nice high luxurious texture finish to this upper part of the glove box, but down here we've got this rather robust plastic and some nice chunky controls that could be used with gloves, and that was always Land Rover's ethos. One of the biggest changes in this latest generation of Discovery is the use of the new Pivi Pro system, which is by far and away so much better than the one on previous generations of the Discovery because it's packed with features, but most importantly it's very responsive and really intuitive to use. You also get a nice digital dashboard ahead of you, but the screen that you get there is nice and clear, and the readouts are pretty much the same as you would get from an analog control, which you could argue, what's the point of having a screen, just have analog. But I think the way things go at the moment, it has to have a screen, but the design is nice and clear. You also get a nice socket here for charging devices, and you get a wireless charging pad for your phone too. Really big door bin in the middle with different compartments and different sections. This one has a fridge in it, so you can actually cool it down to keep drinks or snacks or chocolate from melting in the heat. Not that we have to worry about that on our cold day today. And I also like that you get the captain's chair style armrest, which can be adjusted in height. And that means you can settle in, particularly on the motorway, settle into a really nice driving position that makes you feel comfortable and ready for a long day in the saddle. I like that the rugged finish of the forward part of the Discovery's cabin is translated to these middle seats too. So we've got some nice chunky controls for the heating and ventilation, and we've got some plug sockets down the bottom, as well as individual USB points on each seat. And I think that's going to be very useful for making sure there are no arguments about who gets to charge up their phone or tablet. What you can notice from when you're sitting back here is how thin these front seats are, and that's been done for a reason. It means you get more knee room and more leg space back here. There's also plenty of room for my feet and loads of headroom, despite there having separate controls for the lighting in the middle here. This one also has a double glass roof section, which does usually eat into headroom, but in a car as large as this, it doesn't make too much of a difference. In the middle, there's a pleasing lack of transmission tunnel, so that person in the middle isn't going to have their feet squashed away, and actually there's plenty of room to spread out for 3 abreast, so you could call this a genuine 5-seater if you were excluding the 7 seats, and actually probably most people are going to do that and get a huge boot in the process. I think in terms of a blend between fit and finish and practicality and useful functions, the Discovery definitely hits the nail on the head. What's it like in the rearmost seats of the Discovery? Well, it's not too bad. My knee room is pretty tight, but that's to be expected, and there is actually quite a lot of room for my feet. Headroom is also good, but I found because there's not so much glass back here, you feel slightly more cocooned into it. You might call it claustrophobic, but that's how you judge it. I also like the fact that the rearmost seats are heated, which seems like a very luxurious feature, but it does mean that if you're sat in the back here, you don't feel like you're in the cheap seats. I will say, however, that this car's electronic systems for lowering and raising the seats is just far too complicated. As we've seen in cars like the XC90, one lever brings it forward, one lever puts it back down again. In this car, with all the buttons and all the controls, by the time you spent faffing around raising and lowering them, you could have just used a lever to put it up or down. So I think that is a slight downside to this higher tech version, but actually makes things slower. Open up the Discovery's big boot and you'll find that actually initially there's not a huge amount of space here, although you can lower this section at the back by pressing a button. And that gives you a nice little platform to sit on when you are putting your wellies on, or you just want to sit the kids there to get their shoes laced up. From then on, you've got loads of flexible options which you can activate via these electric buttons at the side. Now, as I've explained in the interior, this is quite a laborious process. You'd think that electrical seats would make things easier, but actually it seems to make them harder because you have to wait around for them to slowly go up and down. And also we found today that if you have the ignition switched off for a little while, the systems don't work entirely. So if you had someone left in there, they wouldn't be able to get out. We'll explain the full literages because there are a lot to go through shortly, but you can see that there are lots of flexible options. It's just that seating arrangement and the electrical power that makes it just more than a faff than it needs to be.
As you might expect for such a large car, the Discovery is able to offer loads of luggage space. In fact, even with all the seats in place, it still has 258 litres of room back there. Fold down those rearmost seats, and this increases to 1,137 litres. And if you flatten the middle row, well, it boosts all the way up to 2,406 litres. If you need more room, you're probably going to have to get a van.
We've got a pleasantly traditional setup in this Discovery with a 3-litre turbocharged diesel engine delivering just shy of 300 brake horsepower. And Jaguar Land Rover says that it's enough to get the Discovery from 0 to 60 miles an hour in around 6.5 seconds, which is, in my book, quite pacey for a car of this size. It'll also deliver around 32.7 mpg combined, and I reckon you could probably get a squeak more than that on a long run. And do you know what? It's quite hard to say these days with the advent of plug-in hybrids and full electric cars, but a diesel engine actually really suits a car of this type. Super refined, super quiet. A full tank will deliver around about 600 miles of range, so you can brim it and you're going to be settling in for a long drive, and it's going to handle pretty much everything you can throw at it. Again, the performance is more than adequate. You can really get up to speed quite quickly when you're joining motorway or you're travelling up a slipway. And when you dial it all back, this is a very quiet and very comfortable car. The suspension is controlled nicely, and of course I can adjust it with a load of different settings. And in true Land Rover fashion, I've got loads of off-road modes and a terrain response system which I can set to auto, and if I fancied going off there, it will probably do it just fine without really breaking a sweat. It's more the fact that this is just a very pleasant car to get along with, and day to day it's going to be really easy to drive. The automatic gearbox is smooth shifting and it's quite intelligent in the way it changes gears. You can take control via the paddles, but again, it's not a sports car, it's not a supercar. This is a car to just jump in and drive, so I don't really bother with the paddles too much. The steering is nicely weighted, and of course you've got this commanding view, which is why people are attracted to SUVs in the first place. And honestly, I'm a big estate fan. I like an estate car, and that's what I would probably buy myself, but there's something quite pleasing about driving just a big SUV like this. It feels very confidence inspiring, very comfortable to have all of that metal around you. Of course, this is a big old bus, so you have to be slightly aware of its dimensions when you're travelling on tighter roads like I'm on today. But once you're up to speed with it, it's absolutely fine. You can get used to the dimensions quite easily, and because it's relatively square and you've got a load of parking sensors and a load of cameras, it's not difficult to position, although you're probably going to want to aim for the clearest parking spaces at the supermarket car park, because positioning it against other vehicles is a little bit tight. There's good levels of visibility to be found in the Discovery, though I will say that when you've got the middle headrest in place in the second row, that does obstruct your view out of the back quite a lot. So if you're not travelling with passengers, then I'd probably just lop that out, and then it makes things a lot easier. But you've got big wing mirrors, and although there are quite thick pillars at the back, again, I don't find it too difficult to drive, but you'll have to see for yourself when you get into it. Certainly if you aren't quite as tall, you can boost the seat up nice and high so that you get the same visibility level. I like to sit nice and low in a car, but again, this isn't a supercar or a Caterham, it's a big SUV, so you've got to get along with the high driving position. Of course, being quite upright means that you get a certain amount of toss like that, and that'll be more noticeable for the third row passengers. And I know from experience that it can start to feel a little bit car sicky when you're in the third row of a big car like this going down a country lane. But I think the suspension does well enough to dial most of that issue out. You just have to be a little bit more careful with the inputs as a driver, because sharp turns of direction can just cause the car to just lean a little bit too much and wobble ever so slightly. And that's going to translate to, well, a slight accident in the back perhaps. The Land Rover Discovery definitely has that premium finish that people are looking for from a luxurious SUV. It's also, of course, got that excellent 7-seater versatility, albeit at the slight detriment to boot space, because when all those seats are in place, you are getting a tiny load area. I also don't think the electric mechanisms for this car's seats are the most intuitive, and actually, if you're dealing with kids and you want to get in and out in a hurry, it's going to prove to be a bit of a pain. In all other areas, it feels really well finished, and that new screen is a big difference compared to its predecessor. If you are looking for an SUV that brings the most amount of luxury that you can get, but also with that go anywhere chunky versatility you might want, then the Discovery remains one of the best about. But I do think an overall ease of use, those electric seats just bring it down a notch. But let us know in the comments section what you think of the new Discovery, and also, would you pick it over the new Defender? And while you're here, please remember to subscribe to the Motors.co.uk YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you're notified every time we upload a new video review.